Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the Prime Minister of Singapore and our dialogue participants and our moderator for session 2. And a very warm welcome to our Prime Minister and our participants for our second session. We're going to allow the media a couple of moments to have their photo opportunity before we hand over to our moderator for session 2. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's now hand over to our moderator for our second session. Please join me now in welcoming Mr. Norman Pearlstine, Chief Content Officer, Bloomberg LP. Mr. Pearlstine.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning for an hour in which we shall discuss the state of the world. And given that that seems like quite a bit of time for such a subject, I thought we would begin by asking Prime Minister Lee if he could give us a quick overview that would set the stage for our discussion. So, good morning.
Morning, Mr. Pearlstine. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be back at the APEC meeting in Jakarta or in Bali and be talking to this distinguished audience. The last time Indonesia hosted APEC was in 1994, and at that meeting, the Indonesian leadership, together with the other leaders, announced the BOGO goals, a target of free trade in the Asia-Pacific region. And it was an ambitious program to boost trade and investments, reducing barriers, promoting the flow of goods, services, capital. And indeed, over the last 20 years odd since then, APEC, guided by the BOGO goals, has played a significant role in catalyzing the integration and the regional development of the Asia-Pacific. Tariffs have come down by half, goods trade has quadrupled, and APEC economies have grown twice as fast as the rest of the world, and that includes the developed as well as the developing countries. But if we look at just at the emerging markets, in fact, they've grown 4 times as fast as the rest of the world. Today, 20 years later, we've made a lot of progress in the Asia-Pacific, but it's a time of uncertainties for the global economy. In America, there's a weak recovery going on, but the political problems are far from resolved, as you can see from the federal government shutdown, which is going on right now, and has made it impossible not just for the administration to carry on his normal diplomatic activities, but also to address the longer-term structural problems with a fiscal deficit, with investment in infrastructure, with education, which a lot of sensible observers know that America needs. In Europe, too, there is stabilization, but at the same time, there remain deep structural problems. They've taken significant measures to calm the markets, to quell the panic which was there a year, 2 years ago. For example, the European Central Bank has significantly shifted its stance and goes beyond its original anti-inflation mandate. But some very basic problems will be there for a very long time. First of all, there's no sense of political identity in Europe, which enables them to operate as one country which can manage their banking system as one country which can have a fiscal policy, which can have transfers, which can have the successful countries helping the less successful parts of Europe to move along. In the same way as the United States works when it works. No, it's a real structural problem. Many of the countries have competitiveness issues. They can't all become like Germany, but they do have to make significant changes in their social safety nets, in their labor laws, in their safeguards, in their willingness to adapt to a very rapidly changing and open world. And it's not just the southern European countries, Spain, Italy, Greece, but even some of the other countries, including France, which need to make changes and where there's really not a clear consensus yet amongst the population that this is the way they want to go. And therefore, we must expect in Europe, we hope, a continuing gradual progress, but from time to time, the risk of mishaps and the fundamental problems reasserting themselves. In the developing world, the prospects are brighter, provided the countries continue to strengthen their infrastructure, continue to strengthen their business environments, continue to improve the basic conditions which have allowed them to grow steadily and vibrantly over the last 20 years. In China, growth has slowed this year, maybe 7.5%. But I think the leaders know that they have to work on these issues, that there are economic reforms which need to be done, that their social safety nets need to be built up, healthcare, housing, education. Infrastructure is in hand, but the other issues which have to take place on a very big scale are very vexing ones. And everybody is watching what the new leadership is going to do. The third plenum of the Central Committee, which is when they make major policy decisions, is about to happen in November. And everybody is watching that to see which direction the new leadership will take. There are some signs. They've launched a new experimental free trade zone in Shanghai, which is going to have more freedoms for services, and particularly for financial services. But how that develops will be something we'll be watching closely. But China cannot be the only story in Asia, because Asia is a very big continent, and the rest of Asia has also to prosper as well, because otherwise it will be imbalanced, and I think there will be a lot of tensions and difficulties which will arise. Japan is part of the Asian story. Mr. Abe has set a new tone since he took over last December with Abenomics. It's a catchy term, but it encapsulates the idea that Japan has to make some fundamental changes in order to set itself right after a very long period of malaise and stagnation. Mr. Abe talks about three arrows: monetary policy, a very drastic form of quantitative easing; fiscal policy, spending more, getting confidence back; and most importantly, the third arrow, structural reforms, which will get the Japanese economy set right over the long term, and including participating in the Trans-Pacific Partnership as one lever to open up the economy. We all hope that he will succeed, but structural reforms by their nature are things which take years to implement and more years to show results, and we hope that the Japanese will be able to stay the course and show the results. Because from the point of view of the rest of Asia and Southeast Asia, a vibrant Japanese economy has a lot to contribute. Southeast Asia itself is doing quite well, all things considered. The potential is there. The combined population is the size of the EU. The combined GDP is among the largest economies of the world. It's got the resources. It is progressively consolidating its economic regional cooperation. ASEAN is talking about ASEAN 2015, a vision of an ASEAN community, and we are making progress in that direction. So, besides Asia, there are other parts of the world which we should also look at, and we must not think that Asia is the only story in the world, because in Latin America there are countries doing well, in Africa there are also countries doing well. It varies, of course, greatly, but it's a time of rapid change and flux in the world. But continued prosperity for our countries depends on two broad factors. One, that countries do things right on their national policies, and two, that they do things right cooperating with one another. On national policies, you talk about infrastructure, we talk about skills development, we talk about promoting innovation, and improving the overall business environment to encourage private sector to grow and develop. And amongst that, also addressing concerns which businesses have. And PwC recently did a survey which I think surfaced some of the issues: strengthening regulatory and legal frameworks, making procurement processes more transparent. I think the countries know what the issues are. The challenge is making it happen. But countries need to work together as well in order to get the regional context, backdrop right. Removing barriers to trade, particularly non-tariff barriers, improving supply chain flows so that the trade can move with minimum hindrance, and pursuing FTAs, bilaterally, regionally. We've got many such projects going on in the Asia-Pacific region. I think the one which has the most attention is a Trans-Pacific Partnership, because the US is participating with countries on both sides of the Pacific. But there are other initiatives as well. There's a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is on the west side of the Pacific. There's the Pacific Alliance, which is on the east side of the Pacific. And these are all building blocks eventually towards the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, because it's a complex region and we can't go in one big bang. So different pieces overlapping, eventually merging into a coherent whole. But the regional context also depends on peace, stability, security, because that's a prerequisite for any economic progress. So there will be business opportunities in Asia in this environment. The middle classes are growing, incomes are rising, people are traveling, people are spending, lifestyles are changing. And that's a tremendous business opportunity. There are also opportunities for production, because as more countries join the global economy, as countries like Indonesia and Vietnam improve their business environments, there will be opportunities for companies to invest, to manufacture, to export, and to create prosperity wider in the region. But we hope that the businesses will also do their part to promote this process. Firstly, encourage governments to be open and not to go for protectionist measures. I know everybody says this, but I know every business lobbies their government in order to look after their interests. But it's important to maintain that public support for openness and integration, because unless you have that, if we all close ourselves up, or even hinder the process of trading and doing business with one another, I think we're just going to make things worse for all the countries. At the same time, businesses can provide concrete feedback to governments on what they need to do more, or how they need to perform better. And the feedback has resulted in useful initiatives through the APEC process. For example, we've got the APEC Business Travel Card, we've got the Asia Region Funds Passport, and we hope that we get more ideas from the business people. Every time we meet as APEC, we meet the business community, and from these, new initiatives can come. So we value forums like the CEO Summit. We get a chance to talk to you, and we get a chance to hear you as well, and hear your concerns, and pick up ideas from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Dennis Nally, as chairman of PwC International, you preside over the publication each year of the APEC survey of CEOs that Prime Minister Lee referred to in his comments. I wonder if you could talk about some of the key findings from this year and perhaps focus specifically on issues regarding attitudes toward infrastructure and toward consumer demand.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Norman. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you today. This is actually the third year that PwC has conducted this survey in conjunction with APEC. And hopefully you have a copy of it. I would encourage you to take a look at it. I think there's a lot of great information in there, not only from an overall perspective, but also as it relates to individual countries. As was indicated earlier, this is the most comprehensive survey we've done to date. About 470 CEOs and executives actually participated in this year's survey. All 21 APEC countries were involved in this. So I think it's a very good look at how the CEO of the business community is actually feeling about the prospects for the next several years or so. It's a comprehensive report, about 30 pages. Let me see if I can boil it down to about 4 or 5 key points to stimulate maybe some thoughts. First off, I would say some good news. CEO confidence levels are actually up this year as contrasted to a year ago. And I think that's a very positive message, notwithstanding the challenging economic picture that we're collectively looking at around the world today. 42% of the CEOs that participated in the survey are very confident about their revenue growth over the next 12 months, and that compares to about 36% a year ago. So again, a very positive trend in terms of confidence levels coming from the CEO community. Also on a good news front, prospects for employment actually look good. 70% of the CEOs that responded to the survey are actually adding headcount over the next 3 to 5 years. And only 11% actually plan to reduce headcount, and that compares to about 26% a year ago. So a much more positive view around the outlook as well as jobs going forward. In terms of investment, I think some interesting information. Again, more good news. 68% of the CEOs are actually increasing their investments in the APEC economies over the next 12 months. And I think that really sends a very powerful message around the importance of this part of the world to the business strategies that they're focused on. And we asked the CEOs what's behind this. Their messages were actually fairly consistent. First and foremost, they look at the emergence of the middle class and the continued development of that, which is going to create all kinds of opportunities. Certainly the rapid urbanization that's taken place in many of the 21 APEC countries. And then finally, a real demand, as the Prime Minister indicated, for infrastructure development, all driving the growth agenda, if you will, looking forward. When we look at where investments are to be made over the next 3 to 5 years, the CEOs identified 3 primary countries involved. First, not surprisingly, China. Second, Indonesia, right here today, and then the United States, which I think is an interesting perspective in terms of the top 3 destinations for investment. And when we talked about, how are the CEOs planning to deliver the growth that's envisioned in their business plan, they really unanimously focused around the emergence of the middle class as driving their growth agenda. And what's really interesting to me anyways is that they're really focused on the development of new products and new services that can really meet the demands of this emerging middle class. In fact, 25% of the CEOs in the survey plan significant changes. 25% actually plan significant changes to their product mixes, brand and customer service agreements to really capture this growth, which I think is a real trend in terms of what we're beginning to see here. And what's really interesting about this point is that when we go back to 2006, and we talked about the growth agenda back then, as everyone in this room knows, it was all about labor and manufacturing efficiencies and now we're talking about new products, new services to really capitalize on the middle class. So really interesting change in focus in terms of how the CEOs are thinking about the growth agenda going forward. The fourth point I'd make is what's really holding the CEOs back today from achieving the growth, from making the investments that they're really trying to achieve. And the first, as the Prime Minister indicated, a lot has to deal with the regulatory consistency around intellectual property, governance, which really could unleash even more investment, more realization of the growth potential, which is interesting. And the second, which was also alluded to, which is the need for increased focus and level of investment for infrastructure in order to realize the potential that really exists, in this part of the world. And finally, maybe just to close, we talked about the CEO's assessment of what's really been happening from a trade negotiation standpoint. And by and large, I think the CEOs are very positive about the ongoing development, the ongoing discussions around individual trade negotiations. In fact, 69% of the CEOs have actually said that the multiple trade tracks that are being pursued in this part of the world are going to clearly create additional opportunities for them to achieve their growth objective. And to me, what was really interesting about this, you go back to 2001, there were actually 5 free trade agreements that existed in Asia. And today there's 71 in place, but what's really interesting is there's another 84 in negotiation to realize this potential. So a continuation of movement to really open up the trade amongst countries within APEC. And that's the good news. The challenge, I think, that exists here on the trade front is really how do you deal with that increased complexity? How do you really deal with the increasing cost of dealing with these multiple trade agreements? And ultimately, I think there's a clear message from the CEO community to continue to evolve this to get a much more aligned and consistent approach to dealing with trade in this part of the region. I think that's even a further indication of the ability to really achieve the growth agenda and the potential that really exists in this part of the world. So bottom line, good news, positive stories, challenges, yes, but I think some real opportunities coming through the survey. And again, I'd really encourage you to take a look at the survey results. I think there's a lot of information that could be useful as you think about your business and you think about the next several years. So maybe Norman,
thank you, Dennis. Ray, I wonder if you could pick up on that. As President CEO of Moody's, you not only have great information about corporations, but you also, of course, are engaged in ratings of countries as well as companies. And I wonder whether you share Dennis's optimism about the region, whether there are trouble points that you ought to be focusing on or areas that perhaps have a level of concern that might be a little different from the overall perspective.
Sure. And first of all, I want to say how honored Moody's is to be here and to be participating, and we are very appreciative of the opportunity. In terms of Dennis's comments and Moody's views about the region, I think they are consistent, broadly speaking. The region has had a good growth track record. There has been significant achievement across many countries. We have, in terms of speaking about creditworthiness and our views of creditworthiness, the economies in the region are stable. They have been resilient, and that is certainly a positive as we move into what will probably be a more difficult macroeconomic environment driven by eventual monetary tightening in the U.S. And the consequences for different countries around the world as a result of monetary tightening. To that end, I would just point out that the discussions about quantitative easing and the taper or reduction in quantitative easing have certainly already been revealed in the market reactions. There has been some market volatility, currency devaluations, interest rate movements. So the effect or effects of tapering when it does eventually come have already been anticipated by the markets, and that's not surprising. I would point out that when the taper does begin, that is not in and of itself monetary tightening. That is just a reduction in the degree of accommodation that we have through purchase of Treasury securities and mortgage-backed securities in the U.S. And I think it will be probably not until the end of 2014, perhaps even into 2015, before we see the quantitative easing has stopped completely, and we move into a period in the coming years of higher official interest rates and more monetary, actual monetary tightening. Now, the consequences for that are not domestic to the U.S. They do have implications for the rest of the world and the APEC countries. But we are looking at a situation where the consequences should be quite different as we move from country to country, depending on countries that have fixed interest rate versus floating interest rate regimes, whether there is borrowing in domestic currency or in foreign currency, the degree to which economies are driven by exports, and the degree to which a strengthened dollar and hopefully economic momentum in the United States encourages more imports and supports export economies. So there's a significant degree of variation that we would anticipate seeing in the coming years. And the Asian region is, certainly coming to this period of perhaps more difficult economic conditions from a position of strength. As I said, there has been stability in the region. There has been good growth in the region. There has been accumulation of reserves, and all of those speak very well for the ability of the Asian region to continue to grow through a different set of conditions than we have experienced in the last couple of years. So,
thank you very much, Ray. No conference on APEC could really begin to take off without some serious discussion about China, and we're honored to have with us Frank Ning, the chairman of COFCO, a major player in terms of consumer products, but also broadly involved in areas of importance to the Chinese economy. Frank, could you talk a bit about what we see going on with the economy now, and specifically what the implications of a new president this year might have for the economy going forward?
Thank you, Norman. First of all, it's nice to hear what a PwC report said about China. So China is still one of the most popular destination to travel and to invest. And also, Prime Minister Lee also mentioned China with some confidence. Every time when the world economy kind of getting some challenge, people worry about China first, whether China's high growth will be slowing down. Since the very kind of first financial crisis in Asia in 1998, 10 years later in the US start to 2008, all these financial crises, then people worry about it, how China's economy will respond to that crisis and slow down and drag the world economy even further into a recession. But all the worries, concerns in the past today proved wrong. Why? Because the momentum of the economy or the growth are in a different kind of driving pace and structure. So it is an economy with 1.3 billion people, with 800 million people urbanization, with a reform in every aspect of the economy, and with the foreign investment coming to the country, over $100 billion a year, and with ability to export, and with ability to absorb, ready to serve, kind of ready to use technology from all over the world. And also with a relatively stable and more kind of economical, mature government. So put it all together, so the whole thing drive the economy grow for the last 20 years or more. But today, China again faced its own challenge. So like everybody said before, you can't rely on export anymore or too much. You can't rely on government investment too much. You can't rely on low-cost labor too much. You can't rely on these environmental kind of pollution things. Not being taken care of too much. Or you can't rely on all this currency depreciation. Actually, the currency has been appreciated for the last 5 years or 10 years even. So put all together, there's a new challenge. So will the economy slow down? A little bit. To which level? I think to a level the Chinese economy will feel comfortable to get a relatively reasonable full employment. So every year there's going to be at least 10 million, about 10 to 15 million people move from the countryside into the city to find a job. Every year there are going to be over 10 million college graduates to find a job. So at least the economy must grow at a level to be able to absorb this kind of labor forces. Otherwise, we are facing a stability issue. We are facing a lot of social problems. So how can China achieve this? I think reform. Our president will be here tomorrow to talk about in more kind of official way. But reform and transform his economy from investment type, from a low-cost type, to a more technology type, to a more domestic consumption type economy. And also the whole reform about the whole state-owned companies will happen again. So put all these possible reforms together, and also and I think there will be still some government investment, government spending, investment, foreign investment, domestic investment, to maintain a level of growth and give lead time for the economy to gradually transform itself into a more sustainable and also consumption or related economy. So I think I'm still very confident from our business point of view, from COFCO point of view. We feel the consumption is still strong. We feel people move their diet from rice to milk, to pork, to beef. All these things drive the economy still grow. And also China will kind of need a supply on all these very fundamental, basic consumption goods, so which will again drive the growth of the economy. Basically, I'm very optimistic, and also I think you will see the reform coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Mr. Prime Minister, I wonder if we could expand the conversation a bit to talk about geopolitical risk Globally, of course, Egypt, Syria, Iran are places where there have either been changes in government or turmoil that has certainly gotten the world's attention. Within the ASEAN region, even in a week where Moody's gave the Philippines an investment grade rating, martial law had to be declared in Zamboanga to deal with tensions involving the MILF and MNLF. The Korean Peninsula has certainly had a level of tension this year, and for all of the good feelings toward China, Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, to name 3 countries, have been involved in territorial disputes. With China, do any of these issues jump out at you and say, this is what we ought to be paying attention to in the year ahead, or are all of them, if you will, problems that you sort of have already taken into account when you think about economic opportunities over the next year or so?
I don't think we can easily identify one problem which is going to be the thing which will blow up. But I think we watch the overall trends, and as I said just now, all projections of economic progress, development, integration, and so on assume that there is stability, peace, and security. And if we don't have that, then all bets are off. And in the broadest sense, the stability, peace, and security in the Asia-Pacific depends on the key relationships between the superpowers and the big powers in the region. And the most important relationship is that between America and China. It has to be managed stably, responsibly on both sides with a long-term perspective. And America has to continue to be engaged in this region because it plays a very important role which no other country can replace. Not China, not Japan, not any other power. And that is something which we continue to encourage at every opportunity. I think the Americans have said that this administration has said that it intends to shift towards Asia-Pacific. They said pivot, but I think they've changed the term now. But basically to invest resources, attention, and presence in this region in order to develop the relationship. But America has many other preoccupations in the world. I mean, Syria, Iran, you are developing relations with the European countries. So for all the intention and the will, the circumstances don't always push in the same direction. And that is a practical problem. Within the region, what are the issues which need to be managed? You've listed some of them. I think the individual issues, they will be addressed one way or the other. I do not expect them to lead to war. You could have mishaps, you could have confrontations. It could happen at sea, whether over the Senkaku, Diaoyu Islands, or in the South China Sea. It could happen on land, on the Korean Peninsula. But I don't think any of the countries want to go to war. All of them want to manage the relations predictably. Even North Korea, I don't think, wants to go to war. What needs to be managed, or what you need to watch, is whether, even as all the countries say that we need to manage this peacefully and with give and take, it is possible to work that out into a practical accommodation on the ground, which doesn't harden the confrontation and at the same time respects the political pressures in their respective countries. And all countries have got political pressures, whether you're a democratic country with elections, whether you're a communist country with a different system. These are sentiments amongst the population that these are ours, this is sovereignty, this is sacred, this is not negotiable, not at any price. And when things are not at any price, it becomes very difficult to make a deal. So that's something which we are watching. The South China Sea is on the agenda, between several ASEAN countries and China. ASEAN as a whole is wants to negotiate a code of conduct with China so that even though you can't solve the problems, you can manage them and keep them under control. But I think that's going to take some time. The other issues you mentioned, there are separatist problems in several of the countries. You talked about southern Philippines. Thailand, I think, has got an issue in the south. Other countries, too, have got various separatist movements. As long as there are local problems, each country can manage them. If the international terrorist groups take advantage of this local disorder in order to go and set up bases or training camps there, and then we have a problem. It has happened before. We have had the Al-Qaeda-linked groups operating in the southern Philippines and using the southern Philippines as training. We have Singaporeans who have gone there and been trained there and come back, and we've picked them up, fortunately, before they did any harm. But I think the terrorism issue is something which is a continuing low-grade illness which can flare up from time to time.
Thank you very much. Dennis, one of the things that interested me in all of the opening comments was that there was no particular reference to India. In years past at APEC meetings, questions would be raised about India versus China, who would grow fastest, who would show ability to sustain development. It seems as though that question is no longer front and center, and that if anything, questions about India's ability to maintain even the lower growth levels of the last couple of years is increasingly in question. Did your survey address India at all? And if not, from a PwC perspective, could you talk a bit about it? And Ray, I might ask you to follow up on that as well.
So a great point. I would say the survey did not specifically address India per se, but maybe just a comment or two. I think the one thing that the financial crisis has demonstrated to all is how interconnected all of these economies are around the world. And therefore, it's no longer, appropriate just to look at, what is happening in a particular country. The need is to look across multiple countries, economies, to really assess competitiveness, how one country competes in the global economy. And I think what you see happening in India today is as certain economies move forward because of whether it's good governance, policies, regulations, et cetera, other countries are potentially falling behind. And so when you look at the growth rates that we're seeing happening in India today versus what is projected in other parts of the world, other countries, the competitiveness of the Indian economy compared to other economies is slowing down. And we're seeing that certainly with the level of foreign investment that's going into India today versus maybe what you would have seen 3 to 5 years ago. And I think that's, an interesting way to think about where there are big opportunities today and what countries and economies need to do to really remain competitive on the global front. And I think you're seeing some of that affect the growth rates in India, at least in the foreseeable future.
Ray, I'd ask you to talk a bit about it, and then perhaps we could also pivot the conversation a bit to Latin America, which is obviously an important part of APEC as well, and get some of your thoughts regarding Brazil, Mexico, Chile, or other parts of the region. But first, from a Moody's perspective, how do you look at India these days?
Well, India recently has been, particularly hard hit in terms of the impact of market volatility on currency value. And that is, I'm looking at this from a credit perspective, that has implications to the extent, in particular, that entities borrow in foreign currencies. It makes their ability to repay more difficult and increases the likelihood of credit events. And that's, I would not at all single out India. It's an observation that would apply to multiple jurisdictions, but there has been a particularly acute reaction in terms of currency devaluation, rapid currency devaluation in India recently. The other comment I would make, and again, this would not point either primarily or exclusively to India, but generally speaking, growth policies are easier to pursue than reform policies. And to the extent that reforms are necessary, that is a more difficult, less popular, more difficult political challenge. And so necessary reforms that countries need to pursue are going to be challenged, particularly moving into a more difficult economic environment. So using periods of good growth to pursue needed reform is absolutely critical, and we don't want to lose those windows of opportunity. Turning to Latin America, again, we think that Latin America is, generally speaking, well positioned going into a more difficult macroeconomic environment that I think many would anticipate. Again, the growth that we have seen in recent years has been impressive. If it slows, that would not be surprising in the kind of environment that we're looking at. But again, it is definitely a growth region, a region that has shown both cyclical and I think structural ability to grow, and that structural ability to grow is going to bode well for the region looking ahead to 2014, 2015.
Frank, you also, in addition to having a perspective on China, are a purchaser from many parts of Latin America and so forth. Do you have specific thoughts with regard to countries that you look to in terms of either price stability or political stability that either you have concerns about or that give you a cause for optimism? And we'll make that a last question from me and then ask that we open up to the floor for questions following this response.
Okay, I'll be very brief. Because China got its too large population, so compared to its natural resources, it's a lot of constraint. So when when China look at this world on economies, we look at how another country with how large a territory, how many population, how rich their resources, which will be complementary to the Chinese economy. So that's why I mentioned this few countries like Brazil, like Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. In every aspect, in the aspect of agriculture, mining, oil, different kind of things, with relatively not that many population, but vast resources. So I think in the future, these few countries will again play a major role or enjoy high growth because they're ready to use resources to serve them. So which also the Chinese companies are looking at more closely to trade with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could, I'd like to now open to the floor for questions, and if you're called on, if you could please go to a microphone and identify yourself, we'd be grateful for that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Yuan from Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I have two questions. One question to Excellency Prime Minister Lee, and second question for Mr. Frank Ning. The first question is, I want to ask you about the more deeply response on the act in America about the shutdown of the government. I would like you to give more comments on that, the impact to the Asian region, especially at the country that just new in the democratic process. The second question to Mr. Frank Ning. You said about the growing of China in the investment. I just want to know what is your strategy for the food security in your country? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, please.
Well, obviously we prefer a U.S. government which is working to one which is not. And we prefer a U.S. president who's able to travel and fulfill his international duties to one who's preoccupied with his domestic preoccupations. And it's a very great disappointment to us that President Obama is unable to visit, to attend APEC and to attend ASEAN, or to make the visits which he had intended before and after that to Malaysia and to Philippines. And I'm sure the hosts must be very disappointed too, because America is a very important partner for us. But we understand his problems and his priorities, and we hope that they'll be able to resolve them quickly. As I said earlier, it is also not helpful for the American political system to be in gridlock when you have to make some quite basic decisions on how to keep your fiscal state in balance in the long term and how to strengthen your competitiveness over decades, because these are jobs which take more than one presidential term to carry out. But America is a very vibrant and resilient country, and notwithstanding all these problems, I think 20 years from now it will still be a powerful country in the world, and that is good.
Yeah, I think while the shutdown is getting a lot of publicity, it's probably going to remain an issue through the 17th of October, where the more important question of whether America defaults or not will come to a head. And I think a number of us do feel that, knowing the way Congress usually operates, there will be some kind of temporary Band-Aid that will just make it an issue we can revisit again before Christmas. But that may be too pessimistic a view. Frank, would you like to respond to the question about food security in China, please?
Yes. I hope the U.S. can open their museum for the Chinese tourists to visit. Because they are already in Washington. So for food security, I think you can't isolate the Chinese food security by its own. It's very much a worldwide issue. To be short, I'm very confident we have no food crisis at all in the whole world. Because look, in the last, let's say, 30 years, the food production, agriculture, has been steadily grow according to the demand. Even food has been something relatively low cost for everybody. I mean, food companies or agriculture companies are not really making a good return at all. But there's still kind of a continuing investment, some subsidy from government to maintain the worldwide food supply. There are some small issues, yes, in some kind of a country. It's not a worldwide food crisis issue. It's an affordability issue. We got a lot of stock in our inventory, but somebody in Africa or somewhere still starving, because this is it's not really a worldwide food crisis. So having said that, for China, China has been working hard in the last 30 years, try to be self-sufficient. So in the last 10 years almost, the Chinese agricultural output has been steadily kind of growing to a level of 600 million metric tons this year, which is about 95% self-sufficient. So having said that, but still we have to say the Chinese are kind of moving their diet from eating rice or wheat directly, now eating more, let's say, high protein, beef, pork, even kind of chicken, fish, different kind of things. So there's a conversion rate there. The conversion rate is relatively about 1 to 4 something, 4 to 1 something, which again will push the kind of agricultural consumption in China up because of conversion. Even they're eating less rice, but if you're eating more pork or beef, you cause more animal feeds. You know, for example, last year, COFCO, we bought 2.5 million tons of wheat from Australia, first-class good wheat, but we ship into China for animal feeds. And our Australia trading partners are very surprised. But that's the reality is China is taking more animal feeds than any grain people eat. So from there, I think China will maintain its own first priority to produce enough food for its own population. But China will trade more with outside world for soybean, for corn, even for rapeseeds, wheat, everything, for sugar, for palm oil, and different kinds of agricultural products. But I'm quite confident technology, efficiency, and also agricultural investment, plus a very good potential from Brazil, from Russia, from the Black Sea area, a lot of agricultural potential there, and much more the capacity than today we can produce. So I think we are relatively confident as long as we keep research, investment into agriculture area, so China and the world will be safe on food supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, another question, please. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Kim Fan from the International Law Institute in Washington, D.C. And my question is to the great Prime Minister Lee, who is so level-headed and wise. So I want your advice on this. On the issues of being able to attract international investments, how do you convince countries to open up their borders and stop just protecting their national markets and also be prepared to open up for international competition, not just asking for international investments? And the second question is about reform and on procurement and corruption. As you know, reform is basically a redistribution of wealth and resources. So how do you convince countries and the powers that control within a country that anti-corruption measures and transparent procurement is important for them, when that would mean that they would have to lose some of that power and control? Thank you.
I don't have magic answers to these questions. They're very difficult questions. I think on the first one, why do countries try to protect their markets rather than open up, when we know that opening up is a good thing in general for everybody? I think one answer is that people feel insecure about the uncertainties of change. If you open up, what's going to happen to my job, and can I have some other place to go to? And if there's prosperity generated, does it come to me, or does it go to some other group, maybe a minority which benefits greatly from globalization, instead of a majority which feels that we are entitled to share in the prosperity? And that is becoming a serious problem. And unless countries are able to develop policies which enable more of their people to benefit from globalization and give people more assurance and stability and buffer against the uncertainties which globalization brings, I think these pressures are going to continue. It's a reality. There's, of course, the issue of special pleading, because there will also be companies which will press their case vigorously, which may get control in the political process, and they make political donations, and then the politicians have to listen to them and pay attention to their special interests, which are contrary to the interests of the country as a whole. And I think many countries can see this. That is a specific problem which needs to be overcome. But the broader issue of assurance, of prosperity, of wide benefits from globalization is one which many countries face. As for anti-corruption, I think every country knows that corruption is not good and that you need to take measures to clean it up, to enforce, to maintain standards, and to keep the whole system clean. But it's not so easy to get it straight, because once it's entrenched, it's like a cancer, or like a computer virus. You remove one piece of it, the other piece is still there and it grows back. And unless you can go in systematically or comprehensively, maybe you have a revolution, start from a clean slate, then you rebuild society in a new model. But that's mostly not possible, and so countries have different degrees of success in dealing with corruption. And that's one of the things which businessmen must take account of when they decide where they're going to invest.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Professor Hsien from the University in South Australia. My question is to Prime Minister Lee. From your father to Prime Minister Goh to yourself, you three have been able to lead Singapore every decade, adapting to new change and innovation. As we look forward, where do you see the future in adoption of innovation, primarily when it comes to skilling up for future students? I mean, you have to start looking now to prepare at the lower school, but also into the universities. And to Dennis Nally, how do you see aligning in your views dealing with CEOs over those issues, meeting, where they see the future demand for training, education? Gentlemen?
Well, education is one of our top priorities in Singapore, and we are investing in our young people, not just from schools to universities, but across the whole spectrum of skills, abilities, interests, and roles. And so you can see that it's not just our schools which have got good investments, good teachers, well paid, well resourced, well trained, and well supported, so that they can do a good job of teaching students in all our schools in Singapore, which is why we have a slogan, every school is a good school. But we go beyond schools to look at our universities, our polytechnics, our institutes of technical education. Every student should finish school, and nearly everybody does, and after school should go on to post-secondary education. In the Institute of Technical Education, he gets good technical training and preparation for entering the job market, or for further education should he want to. In the polytechnics, they get a technical course, high standard, highly employable. In the universities, we try to tilt people to subjects which are science, technology, bio-based, courses and skills which will find them jobs and will keep them employable for a long time to come. And one important element of keeping employable is to learn how to continue to upgrade and upskill yourself even while you're working. Because you graduate from school when you're 20, 25, but you're going to be working till you're 65, 70, maybe beyond. And in 40 years, the world will change, and what you learn will have become obsolete. And you must be able to continue to reprogram yourself, download new firmware, reboot if necessary, and continue to be useful for a very long working career. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, thank you very much. And my thanks to all of our panelists for doing what I think was a remarkable job of covering a huge amount of territory and a very large number of issues, setting the stage for further discussion in the panels to come and in speeches to follow. I do think that the overall view about the opportunities in Asia and the continued performance within APEC of the economies is appropriate. I also think it was very telling that so many of our speakers talked about the difficulty of reform, and I think while the opportunities for innovation, the opportunities for investment in infrastructure, education, and so forth are well understood, one of the things we'll want to keep our eye on over the next year is the political solutions that that will result from elections in India, from new governments taking hold in countries, with countries having to deal with issues that have come back to haunt them from decades past, whether it be in Chile or in Malaysia in policies. And I think all of that will lead to great discussions over the next couple of days. So again, my thanks to the panel for doing such a great job setting the stage this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pearlstine. Ladies and gentlemen, bringing to a close our second session, kindly rise now for the departure of Prime Minister Lee. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, let's now take a half-hour networking break. We look forward to your return at 11:15 for our session 3. That'll be our CNBC televised summit roundtable on global growth with the president of Chile. So we look forward to your return 11:15 for the next session, and you can enjoy your refreshments now at the Delegates Lounge. We'll see you in 30 minutes. Thank you.